my senior year in college, Narita was pregnant, and she was due in the last of September, and so she did not work. She tended Ross and Joe's little boy, and so I worked. And during the week, I would go every Monday through Friday. I would go down to the college and work sweeping floors for the for an hour and a half to 2 hours in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning. Then by the time hour and a half, we would go to classes at 8 o'clock. And then I worked at the bakery on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday night, and I worked at the service station on the other 2 nights plus on Sunday morning. And I went with and I worked with Dale on the milk route on Saturdays, and so Narita had on the fridge. She had a schedule of where I was at, so she'd know where I was at when she needed me. But we worked hard, and then Laurie was born in the last of September, and so we went through the senior year, and then so she tended through that senior year, and it was very interesting because we were living in the trailer house. I talked about that already,
Mm-hmm.
and we lived up on the campus, and I rode the bike to down to class all the time and back. And if I was going back up after my second class, the wind coming out of Logan Canyon,
Mm-hmm.
blowing strong, and I'd be on the bicycle trying to go east, and it was pretty hard, because especially when I was packing my drafting board and my drafting equipment, and so I could get all of my work done. And so it was very interesting anyway. But you know how cold it gets in Logan, especially in the fall and the winter, and so it's we didn't go too far. We went to Star Valley, and when we were going, in one time we went home for Christmas, and Laurie D, I had built and so, wait a minute, I have to get it around. We had Laurie D that senior year, my junior year in September, and so then when we graduated in the spring of '58, we had gone and did I tell you about when we traveled to California looking for a job?
No.
There were 4 of us left, and 4 of us that graduated, and we took one of the fellow's cars, and Dale Jenkins gave me his gas credit card, Chevron credit card, just to help me, because we didn't have any money yet, and so I had helped him quite a bit, especially when we cut down all those trees that was in the backyard, and so we went over to Reno, to Sacramento, over to the coast, went down to San Francisco and Scipio, and then we went on down and came back to Las Vegas, and the one gentleman that went with us, he got a job in California, and we stopped at Percy Williams, that's Craig's dad, he
Mhm.
went with us, and he had a friend that was married, and he and his wife lived in Las Vegas, and they taught school there. And so he called him and asked him if he would call Brother Brindley, who I had interviewed him at Utah State for a job down here down in Las Vegas, and he said wanted him to call Brother Brindley and tell him that Dee Allred that you interviewed really wanted to move to Las Vegas, because he had worked here in Las Vegas between his freshman and sophomore year, and he's married and had a child, and they wanted to move to Las Vegas because they went on their honeymoon in Las Vegas and really liked it. And so we stopped in Las Vegas, and we stayed. We had sleeping bags, so we would rent a motel, and two of us to sleep on the floor. And then when we were in Las Vegas, we stayed on that friend's floor. We just slept on the floor in the apartment, and then we went up to Vegas the next day, and we were gone a week. And so a week and a half after we got back there, I got a contract in the mail to come down and teach at Hyde Park Junior High in Las Vegas. And so two of us got a job by going on that trip. And Percy, he didn't get a job, so he had done his student teaching at a junior high in Ogden, and I'd done mine at a high school, Ogden High School, and so he went one more year and got his master's, and then he got a job in Ogden the next time. So it worked out pretty good for us for finding a job anyway, and because they offered me a job in Smithfield to teach junior high school, and they would give me $2,800 a year. And so I got this contract for Las Vegas for $4,200 a year. And so that summer I worked for the dairy out in Smithfield, and I started there after I got finished with graduation, and I ran the machines that cleaned all of the bottles, because all of the bottles were glass then. They didn't have plastic glass bottles then. So the bottles were glass, and then they had cartons too, but the big ones were bottles. And so I washed bottles, and I loaded trucks for the guys on the dock, for the guys to go do their delivering the next day in all of the towns. And then I did the vacation routes for these guys that did all of the small towns out in Cache Valley, and also I did it for Dale's his job in Logan, and all he did was stores. And so I was working at the school too, and so it worked out very good that I had a job out there, and one of the times I drove a truck to Jackson Hole, loaded with milk to take up to that up in Jackson Hole. They had delivery people, but they didn't have any place. They had a place to store it to keep it cold, but they drove a truck up every week then. So I drove this truck up, and the guy that was running that up there, he said, "Take my car back, leave the truck here," and that was okay with me because I didn't know what was going on. So I had stayed with, I'd driven in the late afternoon to Afton, and I stayed with Dad and Mom and had supper with them, and then the next morning I drove up there. And so then I really worked and had a good deal. We had bought a trailer hitch for, we sold the Ford convertible and bought a 55 Oldsmobile, big enough to pull the trailer to Las Vegas. And so we bought a leveler hitch that it hooked onto the axle of the car, and then it came up and it had a hooked onto the trailer, but you adjusted it so that it lifted the truck up, or the trailer up. So it was pulling it with the axle instead of the weight back on the back of the car, which worked very nicely. And so we bought that during that summer, and we also bought a cooler for the top of the trailer because we knew we were going to Las Vegas and we knew it was hot because we had been there. And so we worked. Narita still took care of the baby because Josie was working there, and they didn't graduate until a year after me because he was in electrical engineering, and so she had that work. But so then we moved on down to Las Vegas, and when we pulled we left early morning, and we had to be here on the 25th of August, and so we left early in the morning, 4 days before that, 3 or 4 days before that, and we pulled it down and stayed in Cedar City. And we just stayed in a trailer park, and we didn't unhook it. We just slept in the back. Laurie was in her crib, and we were on our bed, and and so then we pulled it out the next morning early because it was a long drive, and pulling that trailer too. And so we stopped in Mesquite and bought breakfast, and then we left, and we got past Glendale Junction, and we were out in the middle of the desert and had a flat tire on the trailer, and we didn't have anything. We didn't have a jack, we didn't have a spare tire for it. And so here we were in the middle of the desert. It was a nice, beautiful morning, about 9 o'clock in the morning out on the desert. And so I was going to unhook it and go back to Glendale Junction and see if they had a tire or a rim or whatever, you know. I didn't have a jack to even jack it up. And all of a sudden this guy pulled in front of us. He had a large truck pulling it, a long trailer, which he hauled camper trailers up to Utah. He was from California. And the trailer, I think his truck held 1 and the trailer held 4 or 5. And he pulled in front of me, and then he came out and he says, "It looks like you have a problem." I says, "I have a problem. We don't have a jack. We don't have a spare." And he says, "Just a minute." He says, "I saw you in the restaurant. I was having breakfast in the restaurant, and I saw you and that beautiful little girl." And so he stopped. He went back and he got a jack out of his truck, and he set it there, and I slid underneath the trailer and started it up, got it ready to get off, and then I jacked it up. He took the tire off while I was, just after I got it jacked, he had jacked up. He had the tire off, and he says, "I have that tire right there, which is a spare one for these trailers that I haul up, and I'll sell that to you." Okay. And so he put that tire on, and I took the jack out, and then he came and he went and he brought towels and water for us to wash our hands, and brought cold water for us to drink, and I says, "How much do I owe you?" And he says, $25 for the tire. I was okay, so I gave him $25. And away he went, and if you don't think that we were happy, so we went on into Vegas. But that was a day and a half, I tell you.